What's the most intelligent thing you've witnessed an animal do? My Jack Russell would come into the living room, see our large mutt dog in the prime laying area, calmly walk over to the door, and ask to go out. Large dog would leap up and run excitedly to the door. Jack Russell would wait for a human to head to the door and ask out again. All the while the large goofball was getting more excited. Someone would open the door, large dog would barrel out and bound around the yard before looking back at the door, where the Jack Russell would stand long enough to make eye contact with him before smugly walking over to the prime laying area and kicking her feet out behind her to relax. If the mutt came back in, he would go stand by her and just look heartbroken before going somewhere else to lay. I miss that smug little girl. Goofball gets all the prime spots now. I'll use the same story I used for another unrelated question on here. While unintelligent in actions, it takes some kind of intelligence for an animal to know how to play games. I witnessed two crows perched up on the light post outside my house playing what I can only describe as a game of chicken. They both would jump off the light post simultaneously and free fall towards the ground and fly off at the very last second. My guess is whoever got closer to the ground won that round, but who knows. Well, on one of their attempts, one of the crows waited too long and smacked right into the ground. Lol. It got up and flew back to the top of the pole, but to this day it's the funniest damn thing I've ever witnessed, and it was one of those things I wouldn't have believed if I hadn't seen it with my own two eyes. I spend a lot of time in the local mountains and had summited one of the higher peaks enough times to establish a bit of a relationship with the ravens that lived on it. One summer, I was up there on a day that turned out to be much hotter than forecasted, and one of the ravens approached me like usual, but this time came right next to me as I drank from my bottle and threw his head back, beak open, mimicking the chugging motion. I asked if he wanted some. He croaked in agreement, so I poured some in my hand and held it out. That was still a little too close for comfort for him, so he walked away and proceeded to walk around and inspect the surface of all of the rock until he found a large enough indent to hold some water. He croaked at me and pecked at the spot for me to pour some in, drank it up, and then walked back and bobbed his head happily before flying away. I've always known how intelligent they are, but it still strikes me how human their interactions can be. When I lived on a river in the Botanist for a few years, I was endlessly entertained by animals/birds playing games, and young ones trying to learn how to fly, catch food, swim, etc. One autumn a friend commented on the number of geese floating by in the evenings, so we decided to keep count. Pretty soon we realized the geese would float to a certain spot, then in a group take off and fly in the upstream direction, which didn't make sense. Until we realized we were counting the same geese over and over. They were floating the river for fun. There was a long patch of low rapids, and they were flying to the top and drafting down, honking all the way. I had this mutt beagle mix. One time I was making a sandwich, and he was begging for food. I promptly told him to go away. With a defeated look in his eye, he starts to walk away. All of a sudden his ears pop up, and he starts barking at the door and sits in front of it. He always did this if someone was at the door. I put my sandwich on the counter and go to the door to unlock it. Once I get to the door, the little fucker bolts across the room, jumps on the counter, grabs the sandwich and runs and hides. I was even that mad I was impressed. When I was a child, my friend and I were rounding up sheep with our fathers and the dogs. It was a hilly area and we were pushing them down a gully into the yards. One of the dogs took off over a hill, and about 15 minutes later it met us back near the yards with 15 extra sheep that were missed. My Siamese cat once opened a cupboard in the kitchen and dragged a sealed bag of cat food into the lounge for me to open because I'd forgotten to feed her. At least she didn't rip it open right there in the kitchen. Your cat has nice manners. A chimp at a zoo was clapping like the star of the show, and when we would start clapping he would dance for us. He was hyping us up. The greatest showman. I love zoo animals who interact with guests. I went to the zoo a few weeks ago and there was a cockatoo in the kookaburra. Probably botched that spelling, whoops, and I was standing and looking, and the cockatoo said hello, and I was like OMG hi. And then we spent a good few minutes just saying hi and hello back to each other and mimicking each other's head movements. I was so pleasantly surprised. I was crossing a huge frozen river in the winter. The ice was about 1.5 foot in thickness, but some areas had low density. It was my dog, myself, my friend, and my friend's dog. My friend crossed first and had one of her legs break through the less dense ice, but she made it. I then watched her dog cross very nervously and carefully in roughly the same path and not crack the ice. Then came my turn. I actually sent my dog to go first. He sniffs the ground and goes to cross, but he takes this weird scribbly path instead of going just straight. I ended up following him and noticed that the ice was the most densest there. I cross without a problem. My dog places one of her squeaky toys near a small hole between our fence and the neighbors. She then squeaks it and waits for the dog next door to approach in anticipation of retrieving the toy, just so she can bark at him and be an asshole. Edit. Today I learned there are so many asshole pets out there. We helped raise/rehabilitate a crow when I was a child. It had fallen out of its nest. The nest was much too high for us to return it, and my parents rescued it just in time, since there were some neighborhood cats getting ready to pounce on and eat it, so we took care of it till it could fly and take care of itself. It was an incredibly smart bird, very social, and it enjoyed pranks. Its favorite prank was to wait till someone was sitting on one of the lounge chairs. Then it would walk under, reach up through the slats and pinch their butt with his beak. It would do this to many people, but it had one particular person, a friend of my parents, that it seemed to enjoy targeting. She had the best reaction, where she would come leaping out of the chair to see what had gotten her every time. The crow enjoyed that so much that it didn't care if other people were sitting around. It would always look for her. It was not because she had been mean to the crow. She was a nice lady. The crow just legitimately enjoyed messing with people and her in particular. I also had a dog that taught herself how to open the refrigerator, open the pantry, and break out of the car. My parents had to baby-proof the house food supplies against a dog. I was at my nan's house once, and she is a big admirer of wildlife. Big or small, feathered or not, she liked them all. One day she mentioned she had a regular crow visit her that she fed. He would caw if there wasn't any food in the garden and my nan would oblige him, she says. Sure, I thought, until I saw what she was chucking to him. I presumed nuts or seed, but no, slices of bread. Now the crow couldn't carry it away, and he didn't want to eat it out in the open. And in my nan's and my presence, this crow stands on one side of the slice, folds it over, and tries to fly away with it, but no, still too big. So it does the same again, so that it can actually grasp a hold of it this time, and proceeds to fly away with it all folded up. Me stood there slack-jawed at what I just saw. The birds are smarter than they appear, people. Whenever I let my dog dictate the walk, the go sniff command, where I'll let her lead and give the full extent of the leash, she will walk me to the local pet store 100% of the time. There is an old joke/story about this. A man walks his dog every morning for a couple hours, for years and years. The dog, the man, and his wife are all old, but the man gets sick and dies. His wife decides to uphold the tradition of taking the dog on long walks to honor her husband's memory, since he seemed to enjoy them so much and never missed a day. She takes the dog out and walks down the block, after which the dog instinctively turns left and leads her to the pub down the street. My mom was in her bedroom reading one night and her cell phone started ringing in the other room. Our dog, totally of her own accord, got up, went into the other room, picked up my mom's ringing phone, brought it back to the bedroom, and dropped it in her lap. I have 3 stories and I honestly cannot decide which is most impressive. Billy the cat was 21 years old. She was having neurological problems, stumbling and bumping into things. So of course I rushed her to the emergency vet. The vet examined her in the exam room, then put her in the cat carrier, and took her to the back room for a neurological exam. A few minutes later, she came back and said something like, "Based on what we saw, your cat most likely has a brain tumor." She is also incredibly smart. Once she decided she was done with us, she walked back into the cat carrier, turned around, pulled the door closed, and held it shut. She was given a prognosis of weeks to months to live, and a course of anti-inflammatories. She lived for 2 years after that. I miss my Billy. TT. Momo the corgi is a rescue from a puppy mill. She had no idea how to be a dog when we got her. At age 3, she still did not know any commands, and she was not house trained. She decided that the living room carpet was the best place to pee. So, we used a baby gate to lock her and the other dog in the kitchen. Momo's only option when she had to pee was to go outside, or so we thought. The baby gate in question was pressure mounted. Screws controlled the tension. Momo unscrewed the damn thing so the bottom would swing free like a dog door, pushed her way through, then peed on the living room carpet. Smartass. Caesar the severe macaw was my mom's bird. He was an asshole. He didn't like my ex-husband. One day, he climbed down from his cage, which was normal. He knew how to escape and climbed down to the floor and walked up to my ex. X was wearing Doc Martens under his jeans. Caesar started messing with X's jeans, tapping them and pressing on them to figure out where the boot ended. Once he found it, he bit X on the leg, hard enough to leave a raised welt. Fucking dinosaur. Birds are terrifying. You have a message from the pet man. Like and subscribe for nothing in return.